Hey everyone, let me tell you about Switzerland. It's truly a unique economy, incredibly wealthy, or perhaps more accurately, incredibly good at making money. In 2024, its per capita GDP reached an astounding $106,000, ranking second globally. Luxembourg holds the top spot, but with a population of just over 600,000, Switzerland pretty much takes the cake as the country with the highest per capita earning power in the world. And here's the kicker. Look at its neighbors, France and Germany, right next door, with completely free trade between them. Yet, their per capita GDP is only about half of Switzerland's. Italy is even further behind. Doesn't that strike you as odd? How does Switzerland manage to maintain such a high per capita GDP despite sky-high labor costs, expensive goods, and extremely limited natural resources, effectively outperforming almost every other nation? And why, for heaven's sake, does it insist on remaining neutral? How has it managed to uphold this neutrality for over 200 years? Why are its watches so coveted and so expensive? And how are its banks so incredibly secure? Aren't these questions perplexing? Well, today, we're going to dive deep and unpack the secrets of this peculiar Swiss economy. Let's start with Switzerland's most prominent characteristic, its neutrality. Of course, Swiss neutrality isn't absolute. It's influenced by various international political dynamics. For instance, during the Russia-Ukraine conflict a couple of years ago, Switzerland, under pressure from the US and EU, froze over $15 billion in Russian assets. They've done similar things before, but relatively speaking, especially given its central location in Europe, its ability to maintain such a degree of neutrality is quite remarkable. Consider this, it's not part of the European Union, the Eurozone, or NATO. It reluctantly joined the United Nations only in 2002. While other countries have rectangular flags, Switzerland insists on a square one. This way, no matter how you look at it, front, back, or from any direction, it always appears the same. Doesn't that perfectly symbolize its fairness, independence, and impartiality? Sometimes, it even feels a bit eccentric. For example, most countries print their banknotes horizontally, but the Swiss franc is printed vertically. At first glance, you might think it's a concert ticket, but flip it over and it's money. And trust me, this isn't just any Swiss franc. This is one I'm showcasing to you directly on the snow. Laughter. I'm falling for it. Many countries claim neutrality, like Ireland, Mexico, Austria, Ghana, Vatican City, Panama, and so on. But frankly, for many of them, it feels more like talk. It's easy to declare neutrality during peacetime. You just say, our country wants to focus on economic development. Please don't involve us in your conflicts. We seek peace. That's perfectly reasonable. However, once war breaks out, or even when it's at your doorstep, maintaining neutrality becomes incredibly difficult. Take Norway or the Netherlands, for example. Similar to Switzerland, they both declared permanent neutrality in the 19th century. But when World War II started, they couldn't hold out and were drawn into the conflict. Even Sweden, which managed to stay neutral through WWI, World War II, and the Cold War, joined NATO in 2022 after the Russia-Ukraine war erupted, effectively abandoning its neutral status. So, you see, to maintain neutrality for centuries through the crucible of war is an immense challenge. Yet, since establishing its neutral status in 1815, Switzerland has never participated in any foreign wars. How did it achieve this? Let's consider World War II. During World War II, Switzerland was truly in the eye of the storm, bordered by Germany to the north, Italy to the south, France to the west, and Austria to the east. It was a devil's playground in the middle, with chaos erupting all around its borders. But it remained seemingly untouchable, as if protected by an impenetrable shield. This required both highly rational strategies and immense sacrifices. I've summarized its ability to maintain neutrality during World War II into two main strategies. 1. Ruthlessness towards itself. 2. Slickness towards others. This ruthlessness wasn't about being cruel to others, but rather to itself. The core idea was, I'll strap dynamite to myself, don't you dare come near me. If you try to force your way in, I'll take us both down. Switzerland's geography is somewhat like a sandwich. To the south and east are the sprawling Alps. The western border with France is dominated by the Jura Mountains. The northern border with Germany is formed by the Rhine River and Lake Constance. Nestled in the middle is the Swiss plateau, where most of the population lives. So, you see, the entire country is surrounded by mountains or water. Connections to the outside world rely on a very limited number of tunnels, bridges, and mountain roads. From an economic or international trade perspective, this geography is a logistical nightmare. But from a military perspective, it's an ideal natural fortress, easy to defend and difficult to attack. This terrain gave the Swiss immense confidence. When World War II broke out, they were, in fact, very anxious and desperately wanted to avoid involvement. So, they secretly implemented a national redoubt plan. They built a series of fortifications around the Alps, hiding vast numbers of anti-tank weapons, artillery, and machine guns within the mountains or camouflaging them as barns. To this day, many of these hidden cannons remain. You'll see many unassuming little houses that, when you open the door, reveal a large cannon. These cannons were aimed at key highways, bridges, or tunnels. While they couldn't necessarily destroy all of, say, Germany's tanks, a crucial function was to be ready to destroy their own roads or target mountain sides to trigger landslides at any moment. Hundreds of large and small fortresses around the country were laden with tons of explosives, ready to sever all connections with the outside world. These explosives weren't fully cleared until 2015. They also dug extensive tunnels and caves within the mountains for shelters and air raid bunkers. Incomplete statistics suggest they dug over 10,000 large shelters, stocking them with sufficient necessities, communication equipment, and more explosives. Do you see? This was their hedgehog strategy. They wanted to send a very clear message to other countries. My offensive capabilities may be debatable, but I am absolutely not to be trifled with. If you try to force your way in, I will fight to the death and at least make sure you bleed profusely. Even a bridge connecting Switzerland and Germany, completed in 2006, had TNT hidden in its piers when it was renovated. It shows just how cautious they are. World War II was over 60 years ago. The Soviet Union collapsed more than a decade ago, and they were still holding onto those explosives and occasionally hiding more. We've talked about their ruthlessness towards themselves, but that alone wasn't enough to deter the Germans. In fact, Hitler had already drawn up detailed plans to conquer Switzerland. So, Switzerland had a second trick: slickness. This meant, while being a hedgehog, I will also cooperate with everyone. I will be a useful hedgehog. That's where Swiss banks come in. As neutral banks, they were willing to do business with anyone: British, French, American, German, Italian. They didn't care if the money was earned, stolen, or plundered. Deposit your money with us, and you can rest assured, they implied. Because of its neutral status, the Swiss franc was the only currency in the world that could be freely circulated and converted during World War II. Consequently, vast amounts of gold from both Germany and the Allied powers were deposited in Swiss banks in exchange for Swiss francs. Swiss banks could then acquire war-plundered gold at below-market prices. In 1998, the Swiss National Bank finally admitted that Switzerland had obtained $140 million worth of gold from the Nazis during World War II. The financial assistance provided by Switzerland was also a critical factor in sustaining the German economy at the time. When these facts came to light, Switzerland's international image was severely damaged, leading to a significant transformation within the Swiss banking industry, which we'll discuss shortly. Of course, from Switzerland's perspective, it would argue that it was merely protecting itself and doing business indiscriminately with anyone. We won't make moral judgments on this. In short, by being ruthless towards itself and slick towards others, Switzerland successfully evaded the devastation of World War II and even profited from the war. Why do the Swiss have such an unwavering commitment to neutrality? Are they cowardly? Actually, no. I tell you, the Swiss are incredibly formidable fighters. To what extent? For a long time in history, the Swiss were renowned as mercenaries. Starting from the 13th century, after experiencing numerous wars, European countries realized that the Swiss were truly skilled fighters, strong, disciplined, and efficient. Additionally, Switzerland itself wasn't economically developed and lacked wealth, so Swiss mercenaries frequently served other countries in the region. Their pikemen were particularly formidable, forming hedgehog-like phalanxes that would charge through battlefields, sweeping all before them. By the 15th century, they virtually monopolized the pikeman market in Europe, and their tactics were subsequently widely imitated by other nations. Even today, do you know what the Pope's personal guard is called? The Swiss Guard. By the 17th century, Switzerland experienced several devastating military defeats. They were, in a sense, tired of fighting. At the same time, after centuries of mercenary work, they had accumulated significant wealth. Even their banking industry developed and grew to manage the money earned by these mercenaries. With an economic foundation, they finally declared neutrality. But even then, they added a caveat. We can still serve as mercenaries, friends. Don't worry. Later, after a brief period of invasion, the Congress of Vienna in 1815 formally established Switzerland's status as a permanently neutral nation. This attracted over 50 international organizations, including the WTO, WHO, Bank for International Settlements, Red Cross, and FIFA, to establish their headquarters in Switzerland. And because of its neutral status, one of Switzerland's most beneficial industries, and indeed one of its flagship global industries, is its banking sector. More specifically, it's about wealth management within its banks. Wealth management, put simply, is managing money for the rich, for high net worth individuals. Since roughly after World War II, Switzerland has been the world's largest offshore financial center. A quarter of all global cross-border assets are held in Swiss banks. According to UBS, 46% of the world's billionaires, those with over $1 billion in assets, nearly half, are their clients. So, why are Swiss banks so attractive to the world's wealthy? Their former ace in the hole, and I emphasize former, was secrecy. As early as 1934, Switzerland enacted a landmark federal law, the Federal Act on Banks and Savings Banks, often simply called the Swiss Banking Law. The most famous provision in this law is Article 47, which essentially states that banks cannot disclose client information to anyone, including Swiss authorities or any other country. This was codified into federal law. The message: deposit your money here, manage your wealth with us, and rest assured, my lips are sealed, you couldn't pry them open with a saw. During World War II, despite the brutal fighting, both sides could confidently deposit their money and valuables in Swiss banks. While there were certainly ethical concerns, this served as the best possible advertisement for Swiss banking secrecy. Leveraging this secrecy, coupled with low tax rates that made it a tax haven, Swiss banks rapidly attracted global capital after World War II. Two banking giants quickly emerged, UBS and Credit Suisse. These banks continuously reinforced their image of secrecy and security. For instance, since Switzerland had dug many bunkers and tunnels, UBS even bought some mountain caves to hide its vaults deep within the Alps. Credit Suisse, not to be outdone, reportedly hid safe deposit boxes underwater. While you might wonder if it was truly necessary, it certainly sounded secure. And their reputation spread far and wide, becoming almost mythical. In various films and TV shows, Switzerland is synonymous with the highest level of secrecy. I recall The Wolf of Wall Street using Swiss banks for money laundering, the Da Vinci Code featuring anonymous Swiss accounts, the Bourne Identity involving Swiss safe deposit boxes for passports and cash, and numerous 007 movies. As a child, I truly believed Swiss vaults were the most mysterious and secure places in the world. In summary, Switzerland's banking law, low taxes, and media promotion collectively propelled the rapid expansion of its private banking industry. After UBS acquired Credit Suisse in 2023, its assets under management reached $5.8 trillion, more than 7 times Switzerland's GDP. While the banking sector's direct contribution to Switzerland's GDP might not seem extraordinary, less than 10%, its indirect, calling card effect in attracting wealthy individuals is enormous. This has become a crucial engine for the Swiss economy. However, you might imagine that with such a robust secrecy mechanism, the purpose of some of those wealthy deposits might not have been entirely clean. The most common, historically, was tax evasion. Many individuals might have created offshore shell companies in places like the Cayman Islands and then opened a Swiss bank account under that company's name to obscure the true owner of the account. As we've discussed before, the Cayman Islands provided one layer of information insulation, and Swiss banks provided another. This way, whether it was the US, Europe, or anyone else requesting information, Switzerland could refuse to provide it, effectively allowing individuals to hide income and evade taxes. However, I must emphasize, this was in the past. You can't do this anymore. We'll get to that in a moment. And tax evasion might even be considered relatively clean. Large numbers of criminals also deposited illicit funds in Switzerland. For example, former Philippine President Ferdinand Marcos, during his rule from 1965 to 1986, embezzled over $10 billion. This was recognized by the Guinness World Records as the largest government theft in history. Where did Marcos stash these ill-gotten gains? They used numerous anonymous accounts to place the money in Swiss banks. After 16 years of litigation, the crime was confirmed, and the Swiss government finally returned $683 million to the Philippine government. Similar cases involved former presidents of Nigeria, Iraq, and many other politicians who deposited hundreds of millions of dollars in Swiss banks, and these are just the cases that came to light. The reality was certainly just the tip of the iceberg. Furthermore, drug lords, scam artists, and organized crime syndicates had countless accounts in Swiss banks. Switzerland's secrecy mechanism became a corner of the global financial system where illicit capital found refuge. In 1997, a young man named Christophe Mealy, then under 30 and working as a security guard at UBS, stumbled upon a shocking discovery. He found that UBS was destroying documents related to the assets of Jewish orphans from the Holocaust era. In essence, UBS was attempting to appropriate assets left behind by Nazis during World War II. Mealy secretly took these documents home and handed them over to a Jewish organization. The documents were eventually made public, and Mealy became the first person to be sought by the Swiss federal government for violating Swiss banking secrecy laws. He had to quickly flee to the United States. The public's condemnation of Swiss banks after seeing these documents was overwhelming. Finally, in August 1998, UBS reached a $1.25 billion settlement with Holocaust victims and a $750,000 settlement with Mealy. While this incident was settled, it undeniably created a crack, revealing the hidden side of the Swiss banking industry to the public. It marked a crucial turning point for the entire sector. Even though global capital overheated in the decade that followed, and Swiss banking seemed to join the party, it was more like a last hurrah. After 2005, a series of internal documents related to Swiss banking were leaked, exposing how they helped overseas clients evade taxes through various means. In 2009, UBS reached an agreement with the US Department of Justice, paying a $780 million fine and providing account information for over 4,000 US clients. That small crack had suddenly been torn wide open. Countries like Germany, France, and Belgium began investigating Swiss banks to determine if they had helped their citizens evade taxes. Under pressure from various governments and public opinion, Switzerland signed information exchange agreements with the US and the EU. This meant that account information for residents of these countries now had to be shared with their respective governments. While Switzerland still retains many restrictions when sharing information, and its secrecy laws still apply to Swiss citizens, the international reputation for secrecy that Swiss banking had cultivated for half a century has, in essence, become a thing of the past. Since 2008, the Swiss financial sector has been on a downward trend. While wealthy individuals haven't initiated a large-scale withdrawal of funds, the overall competitiveness of the banking industry certainly can't compare to major American banks. The banking sector's contribution to Switzerland's GDP also fell from 11.2% in 2007 to just 8.9% in 2022. Among the two major Swiss banks, Credit Suisse, in particular, suffered due to overly aggressive strategies in its investment banking division, continuous management turmoil, and frequent high-level scandals. With a slight market tremor in 2023, it faced a bank run. Ultimately, the Swiss National Bank intervened forcefully, essentially holding a knife to the throats of both banks, forcing UBS to acquire Credit Suisse for $3.25 billion. It was a chaotic situation at the time. You can see the former global headquarters of Credit Suisse. Now, all the signs simply read UBS, UBS, UBS. Regardless, secrecy brought enormous benefits to Swiss banks. And let me tell you, this concept of secrecy in Switzerland isn't limited to banking, nor is it only about money. Friends, look at the unassuming building behind me. It's renowned in wealthy circles as an invisible vault. It houses approximately 1.2 million artworks, equivalent to two Louvres. There are thousands of Picasso paintings alone, not to mention countless works by Van Gogh, Monet, and even Leonardo da Vinci. It's estimated that the total value of the collection exceeds $100 billion, making it the world's largest invisible art museum. This place is also a hub for many underground transactions, tax evasion, and money laundering. This is the Geneva Free Port. Although it's called a port, it has no water or ships. It's a duty-free economic zone. Many countries establish such free trade zones or economic special zones to promote trade and attract foreign investment. Within these zones, many economic activities like investment, processing, import, and export are exempt from customs duties. Free ports are a type of economic special zone, serving as a kind of duty-free temporary storage locker. For example, if you want to temporarily store goods here before shipping them out transit goods, then you won't be charged import or export duties, you just pay a storage fee. Such free ports are common in many countries, with over 600 worldwide. What makes the Geneva Free Port different? Beyond being duty-free, it has another significant selling point: secrecy. Previously, the identity of the storer, the origin, and the value of the items were kept strictly confidential. You could set up a shell company and operate anonymously. The port might only know, oh, there's a very mysterious company from the Cayman Islands storing a box of unknown art pieces here. They didn't care what was inside, they just collected the storage fee. This kind of secrecy is incredibly important for the art collection industry, as you can imagine. With tax exemptions and secrecy, many collectors would, for example, acquire an expensive artwork at auction and, instead of shipping it back to their own country, store it in the Geneva Free Port for years or even decades. Then, at an opportune moment, they'd find a suitable buyer and resell it without paying sales tax or customs duties. They might never even see the artwork throughout the entire process. For collectors of extremely expensive artworks, it's primarily an investment, much like buying stocks. They're not acquiring it to hang it at home and meticulously admire it. The artwork might never move from its small warehouse in the free port, but the transaction records show countless changes of ownership and skyrocketing values. Later, the Geneva Free Port realized it was attracting many artworks, so it expanded its services to include top-tier security, art experts, conservation, maintenance, and insurance. You can even host an art exhibition within the free port. It's not just artworks it attracts, it also includes fine wines, antiques, and generally anything valuable that might incur significant taxes during import, export, but can be stored long-term. Of course, with such comprehensive storage facilities and services, the storage fees are truly steep. A normal-sized painting can cost $1,000 per month in storage. If you want a small storage room, it's $12,000 a month. Expensive, right? What does such a secret system attract? I'm sure you've guessed, a large quantity of illegal art and cultural artifacts. The Geneva Free Port has been embroiled in numerous smuggling and money laundering cases. After 2005, to shut down channels for illicit cultural property transactions, Switzerland passed a series of laws requiring all cultural artifacts imported into Switzerland to declare their origin, owner, and value. So, cultural artifacts deposited since then have very detailed records. However, for those deposited before 2009, the majority of owners, values, and even what the items are remain unknown. Switzerland can't take coercive measures without undermining its reputation, so they are left to guard anonymous companies' mysterious, unknown boxes. The true extent of the treasures hidden within this free port remains a mystery to this day. You see, a core strategy for Switzerland is neutrality, and a key aspect of maintaining neutrality is secrecy for all clients. In the 20th century, this was a killer app for attracting global wealth and the world's rich. However, in the 21st century, various secrecy agreements have begun to crumble, marking the end of Switzerland's era of secrecy. This means it can no longer fully reap the benefits from the grey areas that secrecy once provided. But the Swiss economy hasn't declined. On the contrary, it has remained resilient and even grown amidst a struggling European debt crisis. Why? Switzerland has already discovered new flagship industries, no longer relying solely on banking secrecy. First, a quiz for you. Do you know Switzerland's 3 highest valued companies by market capitalization? It's not the universal banking giant UBS nor Rolex. They are actually Roche, Nestle, and Novartis. You see, 2 of the top 3 are in the pharmaceutical industry. This makes it clear, a major driving force of the Swiss economy is pharmaceuticals and chemicals. Look at this chart showing the distribution of Swiss export products over the past 25 years. The fastest growing segment, the red part at the bottom, is pharmaceuticals. Now, pharmaceuticals and chemicals account for half of Switzerland's exports. This explains why, despite the surrounding European debt crisis, Switzerland's per capita GDP continues to soar. And looking at this chart, doesn't it also make it easier to understand why Switzerland is reluctant to join the EU? Who would want to join you? You haven't weighed your own worth. Look at how much money I'm making versus how much you're making. Just kidding, of course. So, why is Switzerland's pharmaceutical industry so powerful? There are certainly some serendipitous factors, but Switzerland's stable political environment, high-quality talent pool, relatively friendly tax policies, and the stability of its currency, the Swiss franc, all provide an exceptionally fertile ground for the pharmaceutical industry. And because talent in the pharmaceutical sector is scarce, the agglomeration effect becomes very pronounced. Thus, Switzerland has gradually attracted talent and companies from all over Europe, and even globally, to establish roots here. This sector might not have the highest GDP contribution, but do you know its crucial role in the Swiss economy? It significantly raises the average income of Swiss people. Of course, it also pushes up prices. The average monthly salary in the pharmaceutical industry in Switzerland is an incredible $11,500. That's about 83,000 RMB per month. Do you know which country ranks 3rd globally in per capita GDP, right after Switzerland? It's Ireland. Its high per capita GDP is largely driven by its pharmaceutical industry as well. The second major contributor to the Swiss economy is its manufacturing sector, particularly its machine tools and precision instruments, which are global leaders. Its origins trace back to the textile industry in the 19th century. Swiss companies then began mechanizing production and developing their own machinery. Later, they realized, hey, my talent for making machines seems to be stronger than for textiles. So gradually, many family businesses emerged in Switzerland, specializing in niche segments. For example, they might focus solely on manufacturing a specific gear or a highly precise component, perfecting that one product. Ultimately, the integrated precision instruments they produced achieved very high technological barriers globally. For instance, there's a company called Schindler. You might not have heard of them, but you've almost certainly seen their logo. They're one of the world's largest escalator manufacturers. And then there are giants like ABB and Liebherr, both manufacturing powerhouses. Swiss watches are practically synonymous with luxury timepieces. While their global production volume is less than 2%, they contribute over 50% of the industry's profits. Around the 19th century, Swiss mechanical pocket watches and wristwatches began to be mass-produced. By the early 20th century, they accounted for 40% of the global total. However, they later faced a severe impact from Japanese quartz watches, and the Swiss mechanical watch industry was on the brink of collapse. Brands like Longines, Rodo, and Omega were close to bankruptcy. So, in 1983, two financially struggling companies merged and launched an unexpected watch brand, Swatch. Its core philosophy was low-cost art and fashion. Most of their watches had plastic cases, completely revolutionizing the image of traditional timepieces. Swatch rapidly became a global success, largely helping the Swiss watch industry withstand the shock. Through shrewd capital operations, Swatch also guided many brands through a successful transition to high-end luxury. Do you know who the world's largest watch group is? It's not Rolex, nor LVMH. It's the Swatch Group. Brands like Omega, Longines, Hamilton, Rodo, Tissot, and Breguet are all under the Swatch Group umbrella. I believe Switzerland's unique educational system is a key reason for its success in precision manufacturing and watchmaking. Its educational system is very distinctive, employing a dual-track system. Only about 1/3 of students, like in most other countries, progress from primary school straight through to university. However, 2/3 of students follow an apprenticeship model. After completing 9 years of compulsory education, they directly enter companies as interns or apprentices. This apprenticeship lasts for years, typically involving 3 to 4 days of direct practical work at a company each week, with 1 to 2 days spent in school for related academic learning. Large companies specifically establish apprenticeship programs to recruit apprentices, and students, essentially after middle school, have to go through interviews and find jobs. This forces them to think about who they are and what they want to do by age 15. It also compels parents to understand their children better and help them choose careers. While this early streaming education system undoubtedly has its pros and cons, it greatly benefits industries like precision manufacturing and watchmaking, which are complex and require accumulated experience. It has truly cemented Switzerland's global reputation in manufacturing and watchmaking. I don't know if you feel it too, but Swiss Made has truly become a brand in itself. While Swiss watches may not sell in vast quantities and don't contribute a huge portion to GDP, the brand effect they bring to Switzerland as a nation is immeasurable. Anything stamped with Swiss Made seems to instantly double in price. It's not just watches, it applies to Swiss Army knives, even chocolate, cheese, and milk. These products are all perceived as high-end and expensive. It's not that they're ripping people off or artificially inflating prices. This is determined by market supply and demand, by the trust people place in the Swiss-made brand. With luxury goods, profit margins are inherently high, allowing them to largely avoid competing with other countries on labor costs and profit margins. What aspects of Switzerland's unique economic model do you find most interesting or surprising? What does it take to build a luxury brand? First and foremost, quality control. The product itself, from design to manufacturing, must be exceptional. That's a given, but it's not enough. You also need scarcity. The supply must be highly limited. And finally, and crucially, you need the right kind of marketing. These 3 elements are indispensable, and Switzerland has mastered all of them. Whether it's watches, Swiss Army knives, chocolate, or cheese, Swiss products are undeniably of high quality. They have the product excellence. At the same time, Switzerland has limited resources, limited labor, and their products are meticulously crafted. Watches must be handmade. Dairy cows are practically given strolls in the Alps, ensuring production is genuinely limited. Most importantly, Switzerland is a neutral country, maintaining an image of being aloof and unique, unburdened by global conflicts. Add to this its naturally stunning, almost AI-generated landscapes, and the globally renowned Alps. These seemingly unrelated points subtly shape Switzerland's national image. This also explains why Switzerland has such a high per capita GDP and high prices, yet remains a significant exporter. Keep in mind, Switzerland isn't just in the top 3 for per capita GDP, its cost of living is notoriously high. Zurich and Geneva consistently rank among the top 10 most expensive cities globally due to their exorbitant prices. Many residents living near the border often cross into Italy or France on weekends to shop, which, in turn, drives up prices in those surrounding areas. I remember a Swiss friend jokingly telling me that once you're used to living in Switzerland, the best part is that traveling anywhere else in the world feels incredibly cheap. So, how does Switzerland maintain its competitiveness in the international market? Despite such high labor costs, you could hire a football team of engineers in India for the cost of one in Switzerland. A major reason is its Swiss-made image. It has found industries that offer high precision, high added value, and sufficient market demand. And it's not just one, it's found 3. The 3 industries we just mentioned, pharmaceuticals, chemicals, precision manufacturing, and watches, are Switzerland's top 3 export sectors. Switzerland also consistently maintains a current account surplus. Because of Switzerland's robust economy, coupled with its neutral and politically stable status, it faces what might sound like a first world problem, an excessively strong demand for its currency, the Swiss franc. Whenever there's global economic turbulence, capital rushes into the Swiss franc, causing it to appreciate sharply. What's the consequence of such strong currency demand? It severely impacts Swiss exports. To prevent the franc from appreciating too much, the Swiss National Bank SNB has had to keep interest rates extremely low for years, especially after the 2008 financial crisis and the subsequent Eurozone debt crisis. The franc continuously appreciated. The SNB repeatedly injected liquidity into the market to offset the excessive demand for the franc, even being the first to push interest rates down to 0.25%. Yet, the market continued to buy. In 2011, at the height of the Greek debt crisis, The Economist, using its Big Mac index, estimated the franc was overvalued by 98% against the US dollar. The SNB couldn't sit still any longer. This relentless appreciation was putting immense pressure on Swiss exports. So, they suddenly unleashed a big move. They announced a minimum exchange rate of 1.2 euros per Swiss franc. If the franc broke this limit, the central bank would buy unlimited euros. At the same time, they cut interest rates to zero. Literally zero. This shocked the entire market. The franc immediately experienced its biggest single-day drop ever, and the euro instantly bounced back above 1.2 francs. Every family has its struggles, right? While the Eurozone was begging capital not to leave or sell, the SNB was practically begging capital, please don't come, don't buy. But it didn't end there. As the Eurozone debt crisis continued to unfold, demand for the franc remained very strong. Normally, the SNB would cut interest rates, but they were already at zero. How do you cut them further? Well, they did. In 2014, they lowered the interest rate to a negative 0.75%. Even this couldn't stem the franc's appreciation pressure. Less than a month later, on January 15, 2015, the SNB suddenly announced the removal of the 1.2 euro franc floor. The entire market was shocked again, and the franc surged by another 15%. After the Russia-Ukraine war broke out, the franc, predictably, continued to strengthen and is now more valuable than both the US dollar and the euro. So, you see, the SNB has truly agonized over the excessive demand for the franc and its impact on exports. Their decisive policy management, which twice shocked the market, caused numerous funds to go bankrupt and left many market traders with PTSD. You literally have to keep the SNB's notification bell turned on and be ready to be surprised at any moment. Why does the SNB so often shock the market? Because its philosophy is information opacity. Its strategy is to make decisions and implement policies without any prior warning. They don't mess around with hinting, they just announce it. This is completely unlike the Federal Reserve, which emphasizes extensive communication, using various linguistic nuances to signal intentions and manage expectations. We all know that the Swiss franc and the Japanese yen are two globally renowned safe haven currencies. Their common characteristic is that in times of turbulence, the market buys them, leading to appreciation. However, the underlying logic driving their appreciation is completely different. The yen's strength is largely due to large amounts of carry trade unwinding and significant Japanese overseas investments. When turbulence occurs, this overseas capital flows back, and carry trades are unwound, leading to yen appreciation. The Swiss franc, I'd argue, is the true safe haven currency. People simply believe it's a safe haven, its economy is reliable, and its currency is stable. So, they rush to it for safety. This is why, even with negative interest rates, there isn't much capital engaging in carry trade with the franc. Carry trading requires consistently shorting the franc, and with its appreciation trajectory, who can afford to keep shorting it? Especially when the SNB occasionally throws a shocker into the mix. Investors simply can't bear it. And consider this, to keep the franc down, the SNB constantly sells francs and buys euros or US dollars. Coupled with Switzerland's continuous current account surplus, this has allowed the SNB to accumulate massive foreign exchange reserves, reaching nearly $1 trillion, ranking third globally, just behind China and Japan. What's interesting is that I looked it up. About a quarter of this, roughly $250 billion, is invested in stocks. The majority of these holdings are in US equities, predictably in companies like Apple, Nvidia, Microsoft, and Amazon. Speaking of the SNB, there's another particularly fascinating aspect. It's publicly listed. That means you can actually buy shares in Switzerland's central bank, the institution that prints money. Sounds absurd, right? Even more astonishing, its market capitalization is a paltry 350 million Swiss francs. Approximately 66% of the SNB's shares are held by Swiss cantons, states and cantonal banks, with the remaining portion held by private individuals. While you can technically buy its shares, you have no voting rights. And what's the benefit of buying these shares? A central bank isn't a profit-making organization. The maximum dividend you can receive is 15 Swiss francs per share annually. That's your only return. So, it's nominally a stock, but practically more like a perpetual bond that always pays interest. The SNB is essentially just playing along. All its business decisions are undoubtedly made to maintain the stability of the Swiss currency and the country's interests, with probably no bearing on your shareholder interests. Why do they have such a system? Frankly, a large part of it is historical. In the early 20th century, central banks were not viewed the same way they are now. People didn't consider central banks core government institutions, but rather organizations formed by banks to prevent bank runs and strengthen the overall banking system's credibility. It's not just Switzerland. The Federal Reserve, when it was first established, had a similar purpose, and even now, it's theoretically controlled by numerous small banks. Switzerland takes it even further, allowing anyone to buy its shares on the open market. This actually reflects a crucial characteristic of Switzerland's internal governance: decentralization. While we spoke of its neutrality as its external style in the international market, internally, its primary philosophy is decentralization, emphasizing bottom-up management. For example, allowing citizens to hold shares in the central bank was driven by this decentralized philosophy. Of course, because central banks became so important, this shareholding became largely symbolic. However, Switzerland's concept of decentralization is deeply embedded in all aspects of its national system. Switzerland has 26 cantons, each with significant autonomy, including its own education system, tax policies, laws, and even languages. Switzerland has 4 official languages: German, French, Italian, and Romansh. German speakers are the most numerous, with about 2/3 having German as their first language. Romansh is spoken by very few, less than 1%, as a first language. The linguistic diversity here is quite astonishing. For example, we're in Zurich, which is in northern Switzerland, bordering Germany, so people there speak German. But in the south, like Geneva, which is close to France, the primary language is French. So, they often switch languages mid-conversation. Over 2/3 of Swiss people speak at least 2 languages weekly. Their TV programs and product manuals often come in multiple versions. It's quite surreal. Let's return to Swiss decentralization. Each canton has significant power, and the central core decision-making body isn't a single person, but a 7-member federal council that collectively makes decisions. Even these 7 members are distributed, typically 4 from the German-speaking regions, 2 from the French-speaking regions, and 1 from the Italian-speaking region. Their president serves only a 1-year term, cannot be re-elected, and usually comes from a different political party each year. In reality, the president is largely a diplomatic title, with no more actual power than the other 6 members of the Federal Council. For major national decisions or constitutional amendments, Switzerland holds national referendums. Any citizen who disputes a law approved by Parliament can gather 50,000 signatures to challenge it through a national referendum. Even if a citizen is dissatisfied with the Constitution, they can initiate a national referendum by gathering 100,000 supporters. The Swiss are incredibly fond of national referendums. Theoretically, they have a referendum period every quarter. They vote on important matters, or not, averaging about 3 referendums a year, checking if there are any major decisions to make every 3 months. For example, in 2002, Switzerland held a national referendum on whether to join the United Nations. 54.6% voted yes, and Switzerland joined. Sometimes, you might think the issue isn't that big, but they still vote. For instance, just last February, there was a national referendum on whether to respect planetary boundaries and build a responsible economy. Ultimately, 70% voted against it. It's not just national referendums. Various municipalities and villages also frequently organize local votes. Sometimes, everyone gathers in a large town square and raises their hands. It's quite amusing. You get my point, right? Switzerland has this decentralized political system where people vote frequently. This also fosters a strong sense of ownership among the Swiss. This might also be a significant reason why they chose not to join the EU. Here, I recall a very interesting referendum from 2012, where they voted on whether to increase paid annual leave from 4 to 6 weeks. To be honest, if you wanted more vacation, you'd likely vote yes without thinking. But the actual result was that 66.5% of people voted no. 2/3 said, no, don't give me more vacation. It's too costly for the overall economy, and the long-term disadvantages outweigh the benefits. In 2002, they also rejected a proposal to reduce the workweek from 42 hours to 36 hours. You see, I'm not saying their voting decisions are always correct, but when faced with choices between long-term and short-term interests, collective irrationality can easily occur. So, you can see that the Swiss truly vote with the long-term interests of the nation in mind. I think this is quite rare. Of course, it's also possible that the Swiss just love to work. They're workaholics. We've explored the price Switzerland pays to maintain neutrality, witnessed the rise and fall of its banking secrecy, examined its star industries and the luxury brand effect it has cultivated, understood why the Swiss franc is a globally renowned safe haven currency, and observed its decentralized politics and pragmatic education system. Frankly, all of these factors likely contribute to why Switzerland's per capita GDP is so high. It's hard to summarize it in just a sentence or two. However, in recent years, the Swiss economy has continuously faced significant challenges. We've discussed Singapore before, and it feels somewhat similar to Switzerland, having developed a successful strategy for making serious money in global capital and trade markets. But Switzerland clearly feels more like old money. It has deeper roots, but economic transformation might be more difficult. For instance, as we mentioned, the disappearance of its secrecy agreements has largely eroded the leading edge of the Swiss banking industry. The ongoing economic malaise and sluggish demand in surrounding European countries show no signs of accelerating in the short term. The globalization could also deliver a dual blow to Switzerland's pharmaceutical and precision manufacturing industries, affecting both supply chains and demand. I believe these are very fundamental, long-term challenges and impacts on the Swiss economy. Can old money withstand the impact of changing times? Perhaps in 20 years, we can make another video to see.